Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to our webinar series with Lloyds Bank Academy. This is our first one of 2024, so super excited to get started. We've got so much coming up this year, so do keep an eye out. Lots of helpful resources for small businesses. So I want to say a massive thank you to Lloyds for continuing to partner with us again today. Today we're talking about Power Up in 2024, so very timely, and productivity hacks to prevent burnout. Obviously, we've had the holidays. And it's all about getting started again in 2024. Can see the chat is absolutely buzzing already, so please do say hello. Let us know where you are in the country. Let us know your business. Can see a few familiar names in there already. So thank you so much for getting involved. We've got the lovely Emma Mills-Sheffield back with us again. We absolutely love Emma, and so do you guys from our sessions. She's got lots of tips and tricks for us today. She's got a few interactive parts as well, so please do get involved there. Got hearts coming up. I absolutely love it. So much positivity this morning. So Emma will be talking through how to take control of your time and productivity, how to work more efficiently to avoid burnout, and how to get smart goals for your business which actually work. We will be doing the presentation for about 40 to 45 minutes, and then if you've got any questions, please do put them into the Q&A section because the chat does get very busy. I'll keep an eye on everything and ask Emma your questions at the end of the session. Okay, I'm going to hand over to you and I'll be back at the end.
Morning. Thanks ever so much, Amber. And hi, everybody. I'm looking at the chat and it's really nice. There's some names I recognise. And even, hi, James, we used to work together years ago. So back when we had jobs, I would say. I always think part of being self-employed is that you are unemployable, which is not the right answer, but it's a very nice feeling to know that you can kind of sit on both sides of the camp. So good morning, everyone. I'm going to keep the chat on just for a little bit because I'm going to ask you one or two questions. And then I am going to turn it off because otherwise I'm going to be looking all over the place. Part of what we're talking about today is productivity and prioritization. So I would be doing a terrible job if I was focusing on something else when I should be delivering content to you and actually engaging everybody in the Q&A. So as Amber said, if you want to put questions into the Q&A very specifically, that would be great. Chat in the chat bar if you want to connect with other businesses, say what you're doing and where you're from and that sort of thing. So this morning we're going to talk about productivity hacks and avoiding and preventing burnout. So it's the beginning of 2024. We've got a new year ahead of us. I don't know where you are in the country, but I know it's sunny here in Brighton. So it's lovely. It's a nice crisp morning, one of those days when you think, right, actually, I'm all right. I'm on it. We'll be good to go. So just a little bit of background. I'm ex-corporate background and spent many years in industry running sort of major projects and that sort of thing. Moving into more of a strategy and then coaching role. What I do now is I help small businesses and scaling businesses to ultimately to grow. So I'm independent and I love working with Small Business Britain on lots of their different schemes. Based in Brighton, won a couple of awards last year. During COVID, I accidentally set up a marmalade making business just for fun called Brighton Preserves, which has actually won two awards as well. So I dip my toe occasionally into the product side of things. A question I often get asked is, well, as a consultant, how do you even understand how to run a business? Well, I am a business owner, have been for 5 years, and also, dabbling with product as well. So I do understand what it is that small businesses go through as they grow. So this morning, we are going to cover sort of three main topics, really, and they're all interchangeable. So I always focus on the whole being, the whole person. As a business owner, we are often our business. Often it's just us. So it can be quite lonely and we have to do everything. I get visions of sort of the one-man band with the harmonica, the drums, the monkey and the cymbals quite often. So the three main sections we're going to cover today, we'll look at taking control of time and productivity, working more efficiently to avoid burnout. So there'll be some sort of stress management discussion as well. And also setting smart business goals. Won't cover the acronym now, we'll cover that when we get to that section. And how we can really break things down into something that's much more tangible and achievable. I think that's the biggest challenge for people when they sit down at their desk in the morning and suddenly think there's just There's just too much. Where do I even start? So with that, the question I want you to answer in the chat, and then I shall turn it off, is what are your challenges in terms of prioritizing as a small business owner? Is it A, not knowing what's a priority and what isn't? B, being pulled in too many directions? C, you could probably just plan your time a bit better? Or D, everything is just as important? So there is no priority. Everything's the same. And you might have a few there where there's a bit of an overlap. So lots of being pulled in different directions, I think. Bit of planning. Not everyone will admit to just planning their time a bit better. It's well done if you did put C. Everything's just as important. Yeah, okay. And all of the above. Okay, so I'm going to turn that off now and come back to the questions a little bit later. But typically, as a small business owner, you are going to be pulled in every direction, especially working with parents and carers. You're running a business, you're trying to look after yourself, you're trying to manage the household and the family and all of the ensuing chaos that happens on a regular basis. And often I think just having to stick a smile on the front of it, which is not great. We present ourselves in one way, yet actually internally we're feeling really overwhelmed. So managing that, those expectations is really important. Something that crops up often is boundaries. So I love this quote. It's the only people who get upset about you setting boundaries are the ones who were benefiting from you having none. Now, I'd like to think in your small business that you can set the boundaries around the client or customer expectations, around the hours you work, around what you do. But usually, like I say, you've got your business head on over here, then you've also got the family over here. Everything's happening at once. You might volunteer, you might have charity commitments. I work with 2 charities, and actually recently I've had to reduce that down to 1. So I only focus on the grassroots suicide prevention charity that I work with, because that's a really important cause to me. Doesn't mean the other causes aren't important, but I had to stop and take stock and say, actually, what is it I can do realistically? And I can't serve everybody equally. So you do have to set boundaries for yourself and in your business, also at home, with friends, all the time. So we'll come to some of the sort of tips, tricks and hacks in just a moment. But I wanted to just debunk a myth I hear often. People say they have to be more productive. So how can I become more productive? But I don't know why or what it is I need to do. So when I just asked about what the problems are with prioritizing, when people say basically everything is as important as everything else, and it's just, I've got to get it all done, you cannot be productive. You're going to run around all day long, not getting anything done. Whether you're employed or whether you're self-employed, you no doubt have finished a day's work, sat there and thought, oh, I'm exhausted. I didn't get anything done. Basically, I've probably just done emails. And you don't really make progress. So of course you set yourself these mental targets and think, oh, it's great, I'm going to do all this stuff by the end of the week. You just don't get there. So we're going to look at some tools, templates, ideas, ways of working to just dial down the panic. So we can just create a bit of space to stop, plan, think, and actually make some progress on what's really important to us, and actually start saying no to the things that are distractions and that aren't important. So this slide here just shows that people start on the right and they think they can just be productive, but actually we need to come all the way back to the left and understand what our purpose is in the first place. If it's your big life purpose, then brilliant. Generally, it won't be, and it doesn't have to be at all. But in this context, it means, why am I doing what I'm doing? Not what am I doing, but why? What impact does it have on my business? What impact does it have on revenue generation? What impact does it have on other people? And why am I actually going to carry out these activities? Once you know why you do something, then you can start to prioritize. And only then can you start to become productive. It's like sifting through all of the ideas and all of the emails and pieces of paper. to work out exactly what's the most important and what to do in what order. So someone who's good at prioritizing will spend time on what's important. They will pinpoint critical tasks and leave all the insignificant tasks to one side. Generally eliminate barriers to completing goals. So anything that's a distraction is out of the window. And then they'll also identify what will help in completing goals. Generally, it's also who. So starting to think about how you might outsource or how you might delegate and who can help you. So lots of ways of just stripping down to basics. I almost think it's a bit like going on holiday and just taking hand luggage. You know, when you're going away and you think, yeah, I can take all the stuff and I definitely need 12 pairs of shoes for 2 weeks away. I'm definitely going to need 7 swimming costumes. And we've all been there. You pile it all on the bed and then you have to kind of whittle it down. But if someone said to you, quick, we got the timing wrong, like we're going hand luggage, you've got the tiniest case in the world, just pack what you have to pack. You don't worry about those shoes. You only put in what's important and then you get going. So if you are forced by necessity to whittle things down, you can actually do it very effectively. But I think the luxury of time and thinking, well, it's daylight, I've got between, you know, say 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. I can just fill it with stuff, doesn't work well. We're not effective in massive chunks of time either. We need to think about when we have the highest energy levels and what works for us and what doesn't work. So with that, I'm just going to give you some tips around sort of say like a top 10. And actually bottom left, so working with your energy levels. Are you an early bird? Are you a night owl? Are you somebody who's just balanced in chunks throughout the day? Be sensible. If you've exhibited at an exhibition and you've been at a major show or you've run a workshop or a training day, just accept the fact that the next day you're probably going to be just on emails. You can't keep going back to back to back in really high energy and high focus work. We kind of run out, the tank gets depleted. So just look at your diary. We'll also in the session just look at some of that diary management and that planning for a week. So you can just see where those hot spots are. Because I've noticed it myself. I can easily cram too much in and think, yeah, it'll be fine. I've got this, I've got travel, and then I've got this, and I've got to do something over here. But in reality, you might be out 14 hours that day with travel, plus delivery of something for a client. The next day, you're just not going to be on your A game straight away. And just be fine with that. Make sure that your diary has a sort of a lovely flow to it when it comes to energy and what you can do, because otherwise you won't serve yourself, your customers, anybody particularly well. With that, I think the biggest thing to avoid burning out and stress is actually expectations. And I would hazard a guess that the expectations you put on yourself are much higher than the ones that other people put on you. So you think you can just keep doing, you can keep working at a really high pace. If you are more realistic, and I think a rule of thumb is everything takes twice as long as you think it will, you can just set those deadlines and those deliverables in a little bit more of a spaced out fashion. So it's quite easy now with sort of Wednesday morning to say, yeah, you'll get that by the end of the day. It's like default answer. But why? Does it need to be sent out by the end of the day? If you're busy already, why? Why don't we say by Friday? Or ask the customer, you know, when would be acceptable? So it's just about making sure you're sensible with how you apportion your time and energy. Hey, you know what, let's get it right 1 week and actually get some time back. That'd be great. And there's no harm in that either. The benefit of being in a small business, self-employed, is you are in charge of your time. Yet we still work as if we've got somebody holding a whip behind us all day long. So as we look at this, some more of these tips, think about reducing distractions around you. So try and turn all the pings off on your phone or the alerts. Make sure you're not having constant email reminders coming in on your screen as they fly across the top. Sometimes just turn things off. It's fine. And again, the benefit of being self-employed is you get to choose how you work. So just dial down the distractions. And with that, video calls. So lots of us are still using those day to day, and they're absolutely brilliant. But limit the people and limit the time if you can, because all the time you're on a call, it's taking energy, but you're actually not getting other work done. Each day, give yourself a strategic task. So what's the one thing you can do to actually make an impact on your goals? Choose your apps or platforms according to what you need. So it's really easy to get distracted and say, right, I need all of the latest tools. And although I've put in here, make the most of AI, I absolutely think that's a great time saver for lots of businesses, is don't get too distracted by all of the magpie syndrome when it comes to tech. And we think we have to download absolutely everything. It's going to make our life easier. But the time it takes to learn how to do something, and you might use it once and get bored, you've sort of wasted time. So think about what it is you need. If you need it to send out a newsletter, just pick the tech that will send out the newsletter. It doesn't need to do anything else. Get an accountability buddy. So it's sometimes lonely when you are in a small business. So somebody in your network who equally runs a small business is great to just chat to. You might meet for lunch. That's nice. That's good. It's nice to put the world to rights. Equally, you might just meet up with them online, and you might set an hour or 2 hours as a timer. Say, right, what task are you going to get done? What am I going to get done? Let's work quietly, and then we can regroup at the end. So it's quite nice to just have somebody to keep you accountable. When you know what you're trying to achieve, that's the first part of being productive. Then also divide and conquer the big tasks. Don't get overwhelmed by, I have to build a new website, because that's massive. So think about why you need to build it, what are the elements, and then start to break down those tasks into chunks. So maybe it's research, maybe it's finding graphics, maybe going back to basics, it's finding a designer. So just break down those tasks so they're not so overwhelming. And then lastly, can you set different times to focus on things? So is it time to focus, to think, to plan, to research, time to get your emails done, and then time for maybe client work or doing what you do in your business? If you're a beauty therapist, you are literally face to face with people during the day, or a yoga instructor. So you know that time you can't be doing your emails, like you have to be really dedicated. But I think for people who have businesses that are a little bit more, so not fluid, but where you might be working online, doing something for a client, and then, oh, we'll get distracted and do something else. You're not being as effective. Whereas if you have to focus, then you can work around the edges. So time for what you need to do for your business, maybe it's creating and making product, and then later on it's admin. So having those distinct barriers and boundaries in between is quite helpful for being able to just think clearly and not get too distracted. There's something that gets in the way of everybody, and that's having that mental agility. So task switching between different types of things can really take its toll. So by the time we get distracted, you think, right, where was I? Start again. It's ages to get back into the task. But then also different types of tasks have different pace to them. So if you're doing your bookkeeping and you're scanning in receipts, I kind of put that on a Friday afternoon. In my mind, that's a Friday afternoon job. Stick the music on and just do the kind of lower grade admin. Apologies to any bookkeepers on the course, it is not low grade work. But from an energy perspective, it's just something that for me, I can just sit there and plod through. Whereas thinking really strategically about client work, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to approach this problem? How am I going to set, a project plan up for something quite complex? I can't do that in 10-minute chunks. So you need to focus on when you can get things done. So the opposite of the productivity tips, let's just talk about some of those kind of time suckers in business. And there'll be plenty. So I'm sure you can all put some in the chat that you find distract you or get in the way in your business. Things like Outlook, Teams, Slack, all of the pings that you get in the alerts, they break your concentration all the time. Likewise, social media and news. So most small businesses have to be on social media and you have to engage. So how can you sort of segment those chunks of time so that you're actually doing the work and not suddenly going, oh, panda videos, because it's quite easy to do. With that as well, the news can be a time sucker, and doom scrolling. It's not only the time we spend on social media, but it's going into the depths of despair on some of the threads and the comments. And actually, it's not just the time it takes, it's the mood you're in afterwards, it's the emotional toll. When you come out of it and think, oh, wow, okay, didn't love that. You've completely robbed your own headspace of the work you really wanted to do. So I'm really cautious, and I would caution anybody to just be sensible around social media use. Follow the things that are additive and positive for you. And panda videos, to be fair, are, but in limited doses. And then you have to use social media for work, but keep it in chunks of time. Don't just keep checking and getting too involved. Social media as well, distractions. So first there'll just be something else. It's like the old adage of trying to work from home. You suddenly think, I think I need to make a cake before I have to do the PowerPoint presentation. You probably don't, you're just procrastinating. So if you have to just clear the desk before you can actually concentrate, that's fine, but really set a time limit to it, but be intentional about it, rather than getting distracted and starting to dust all the shelves. They don't need doing. So just make sure you're boundaried around all of these other jobs. So with that, not having clear priorities can be a real time sucker, because we pick things up, put them down, have a go, don't finish, and we never quite complete the tasks. Not delegating or outsourcing, it's a big issue for people. So in a small business, you may not be able to delegate, but imagine you run all the departments. So you are the chief exec of your business, even if it's just you. When you are looking at your, say, bookkeeping, that sits in my accounts department. Social media sits in my marketing department. So just by putting these tasks into buckets, you can then say, all right, Friday afternoon is my accounting afternoon. If you are able to delegate, brilliant. And if you can outsource, even better. So you know what, all that bookkeeping goes off to an expert, because they are going to do it quicker than you anyway, and probably better. So you don't have to be able to do everything. At the beginning, you will be doing all of it in your business. But at times, a great way of thinking about how to grow and how to scale is not just, I need another me in the business, but having someone with complementary skills, or picking up on the areas that you just don't enjoy or you're not so good at. And I always use accounting and bookkeeping as an example. Could be your social media marketing. Have somebody who knows exactly what they're doing do that for you, so you can carry on doing what makes your business brilliant, what makes you unique. And then lastly, too many meetings. So just, again, look at the flow of your week. And if you're out networking or going to meetings, build in travel time. Don't assume you can just get from A to B by magic. Maybe that's the time you make a few calls, but on the other hand, you might just want to decompress and sit on the train quietly and read, and that's absolutely fine. But when you look at all the different networking events you can go to so many free ones, but the amount of time it takes out of your week can be quite intense. So just look at the shape of what those 5 days look like during the week, and make sure you're, I guess, optimizing all the time that you get to spend. And lastly, interruptions always happens. I get lots of, on a webinar like this, you get lots of small business, retailers, people in shops, absolute best intention. I want to sit and watch this for an hour. Perfect. Normally nice and quiet, no chance. It's the time customers come in, which is a good thing, but it does mean it's a bit of a, it's a little bit interrupted. So just try and work out how you can fit different things in. If you have to do training online, maybe that's an evening job, or when you get a day off. Okay, I'm going to show you some tools now, and these are super easy. And there's different techniques here as well. So you can kind of pick one or two and see what happens. You don't have to work through absolutely everything. But this is the sort of the Eisenhower matrix. It's Q1, 2, 3, and 4. And I love doing this in a bigger business and in a team, because people always realize what's just happened to them once everyone else has done this, and they realize that they've just been given somebody's Q3s as a, delegated task. But anything that sits in that kind of first quadrant, that Q1, important and urgent, could be a crisis, could be a deadline. You just got to do it now. You don't get to decide when to do it, which actually top right, things that are important, not urgent, that's when you get to block it out in your calendar. So schedule a time to do your planning, personal growth, long-term goals. The more time you spend top right, the less time you spend top left. So by leaving things and not planning properly, and knowing there's a deadline coming at the end of the week, but it'll probably be fine, immediately it becomes a Q1. And that's when we start to get quite stressed. We can't then prioritize around it. And that's when you start to potentially head towards that burnout cycle, because everything's constantly urgent and important, and mad panic and running around trying to finish everything. So the more you can stay top right, the better. You've also got then Q3 in that quadrant, not important, but urgent, as in they just happen. These are things to either delegate or batch them up and do them in one go, in one type of space. Like I said, 3 o'clock on a Friday. Some of these things that crop up might be random phone calls, either ones that come into you or you have to phone. Like, you've got to go and phone the car insurance, you've got to go and phone your accountant, those tasks that have to happen. Well, try and put them in your diary and say, right, I'm going to literally get all my calls done at 12 till 12:30, then I'll have lunch. So batching things up is helpful because it stops the need to be interrupted constantly as you're trying to work. All those little, oh, can you just? To be fair, that happens in a business more often, but equally it can happen when you're customer facing and someone comes in. There's always going to be, you're at their service. In non-critical meetings, things that seem a good idea 3 weeks ahead, they go in your diary, and then nearer the time, you realise it's quite busy. So be okay saying no to things. No is actually a full sentence, and it's okay to use, as long as people, then they will respect it if you say it clearly and there's a good reason for not doing something. Then lastly, Q4, everything that sits here, not important, not urgent, delete it, bin it, get rid of it. It's trivia, it's gossip, it's junk mail, it's social media, flotsam and jetsam just around. It's just junk. Just get rid of it. So anything that's also been on your to-do list for maybe 3 weeks that you keep adding on every week and it keeps not being done, maybe it's never going to happen. So if it's not urgent and it's never going to have an impact on your business, don't do it. So that should help. Q1, 2, 3, and 4, everything on your list, just start to put it into those four quadrants. You can then really take a view of, okay, well, what do I need to tackle first? A simpler version, and it's slightly different. As I say, there are different ways of working here, which is why I want to give you lots of options, and then you can choose something that might work for you. This is, I like to think this is the coming back from holiday list. I've just opened up all my emails and there are 285 of them. So if you think about your random list of stuff, maybe you're overwhelmed. Maybe you're just looking at the week ahead thinking, this is mad, I can't get everything done. There's just too much to do. A really good way of looking at your to-do list, which I know so many people have, often people have lists about lists, is to look at an unsorted list. So literally just all the stuff, get it out of your head. Then start to code it, colors, numbers, whatever works best for you. So you've got your most important, least important, and what you can delegate or delete. And so that's the kind of step one. So you start to sift through it a little bit. And then step 2, okay, now I'm going to batch those together and look at what are my most important tasks. So here there are 2 most important tasks, and then 3 important ones. Then the last step on the right, you then reorder those again to say, right, exactly what do I have to do first? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, all the way down. Doesn't mean you're going to get through them all. You might just stop and do, I'm just going to do the A's and the B's this week. But the rest of them, what it does mean is you can just be really critical about what comes into your inbox, especially. So you've got lots of different customer queries coming in. You've got junk mail constantly. One task I always recommend is unsubscribe. If you haven't bought anything, you haven't read anything, you're not going to use it, get rid of it. So just try and keep the volume down that you have to handle on a daily basis. Overwhelm is often driven by just too much stuff constantly at us. So if you can just be critical and start to really dial it down. I think this last year was the first time for Black Friday I didn't get spammed constantly. When I realized actually I'd unsubscribed from so many generic mailing lists, and quite happily, lots of small businesses don't do Black Friday. So nothing really came in. So it's quite good to just do that clean up fairly regularly. So that's another task you can do. This is another template you can try, because we are, as I said, we're generally faced with a lot of stuff, lots of information, and it's hard to then balance absolutely everything. So with that, as we just think about our whole selves in business, we don't just run a business. But this is quite a nice way of just being quite critical of where our energy goes and how we're feeling. We can be absolutely making a success in business. We can be managing finances well. We enjoy what we do. We're getting all the money in, or it's really good. We've come through COVID, cost of living crisis, and we're back on track with our supply chains, and we're doing okay. But we're exhausted. So if you think about you as a whole, you can't focus solely on any one of these areas. You have to have a balance across in order to be, in order to feel well, stay well, and actually run a business, which is what you signed up to do. So do think about not just, oh yeah, all the money's coming in, but am I sticking to regular work hours, or am I doing 15 hours a day consistently? Or customers aren't happy or staff aren't happy, which implies something's not working. So I would encourage everyone to just get a cup of tea and quietly go through this as an exercise. And if you do work with other people, or you've got friends in business, chat through it. Just see how you're both feeling about having that balance. Because it's also important to think about, so friends and family. So do you socialize with people away from business? Or is that all you ever talk about? Can you honestly say that business doesn't interfere with family commitments? Maybe workload at home is shared fairly. You get quality time with family, if you want to, that is not mandatory. And also that you have good quality and supportive friendships and relationships. So are you balanced across those two? And with that, health and well-being. So we often are the last person on the list. Everybody else comes first. And especially if business comes first, other people next. And then we tend not to eat so well, potentially. We cancel those gym classes. We don't spend time sort of meditating or self-reflecting. Can you actually say hobbies is something you look forward to, or do you resent them because they take up time? Do you get enough good quality sleep? I think some of these conversations can almost sort of trigger some self-reflection, and people often sit and go, not really, actually I'm not completely balanced across all of these, and that's normal. So you can't necessarily have every day same as the next one, but knowing that something in your business is going crazy because it's pre-Christmas and you've got all of the sales and all of the packaging and all of the deliveries to do, that's going to happen. But then just know that everything else is going to take a hit for a while. But can you then recuperate afterwards and take some time off? And then lastly, are you balanced in terms of your social and community impact? Do you engage with others in the community outside of your business? You've got other networks. That there's always something to help with. So I'm always a big advocate of volunteering, but also then don't overcommit, because otherwise you do start to feel that you're trying to be all things to all people. Get involved in causes that are important to you. There are so many positive benefits to volunteering and community work. And make sure you connect and build networks around you. There are always different people in different walks of life that mean you can just stop and have a different conversation. Go and see a different group, go to a different sports club, go to you know, the NCT group or book club or whoever it happens to be. And then lastly, that people know what your boundaries are. As I say, it's okay to say no. You don't have to bake that extra cake for the school bake sale on top of everything else. I'm massively guilty of that, and I have to be really conscious of actually saying, no, that's not something I can commit to fully right now, because I just know, even if I've got the time, sometimes it's nice to not have to do something. Sometimes it's nice to think, actually, at the weekend, all I need to do is dig around the garden and I might just sit around and read. That's okay, guilt-free. We don't have to fill our time constantly. So just thinking about ourselves and managing overwhelm, because part of prioritizing is to make sure we dial down the overwhelm and the, as I say, the sort of overbearing sense of stuff that's happening. We need to get a perspective, and I love this graphic, around things that we worry about. So normally it's about that big. Things that can happen, maybe that much. Things that do happen, generally tiny. But we tend to convince ourselves that everything's awful. So if we think about, you know, snakes and tarantulas, I'm not a big fan. Networking and presenting. Now, if I asked you all to put your hand up and say, which one do you fear the most? And I have done this exercise in person. More people were scared of public speaking than snakes or tarantulas. Often in business, having difficult conversations about money is something that we really shy away from. We want to put our fees or our prices up. We tend not to, because we don't want to be outpriced. We don't want to upset customers. So we tend not to chase our invoices as proactively as we should do. But we do hide behind that sometimes. But in reality, what's somebody really going to say to you? If you demonstrate the fact you give them good value, they're generally not going to query the price. There's a big difference between cost and price and value. But it is something for small business owners that can be a real barrier, is around having conversations around money. Feedback. If you get a bad review, something like that, that can really knock our confidence. So we just need to take a sort of a perspective about how we respond. And the reason I talk here about having bears in the cave is that we can trigger very quick fight or flight reactions, and our adrenaline can really charge around. We go straight into a state of stress, when in reality there are no bears outside the cave. It's just an email that was badly phrased. There's a big difference. So where we came from and how we were designed to have the fight or flight response is something that, if we're not careful, gets triggered way too often in modern life. And it's really quite out of perspective. One of the last sort of methods of thinking about how we can work on what worries us and what we now need to prioritize is a good exercise to do with sticky notes. And I use this quite often, the circle of concern and the circle of control in the middle. So what are we worried about? We're worried about the cost of living crisis. Okay, that's a sticky note. Put it in the concern circle. All worried about that. But actually, what can I control around that? Can't control it at all. Can't control the delays on shipping across to the UK, the global delays that are happening at the moment, and the price of the shipping process and supply chain increases. Right? I can't do anything about that. All I can control, maybe, are the amount of local providers that I work with. So that's something that you can then take more action around. In terms of where you can influence, well, what can you influence in the middle? Maybe there is some action you can take on delaying your invoices to the wholesaler. Perhaps you can have some influence over stage payments. So there is something you can do without sitting there thinking it's all too much, it's all overwhelming, I can't do any of it. This exercise is great to do when you actually feel you're not in control as well. And so when you start to pull things into the middle, you realize what you can control. Sometimes it's way smaller than you thought you could and what you're worried about. When you realize what you can do something about, then you stick it in your diary, make a plan to actually do something with it. Conversely, sometimes we can control much more than we think. And so we're sort of in that space of it's all out there, it's all worrying. But then when we start to work out what we can deal with, we've got much more agency than we think we do. So then you can prioritize what you need to do first. So I'm a big sticky note fan, and I'm a big working on big paper, colored pens fan. Anyone who's met me knows that there are always lots of sticky notes and things going on. So just do this exercise with, do it with family, do it with kids, do it with business partners, do it on your own, just to get a bit of a perspective. And again, with lots of these tools and these techniques, it's sometimes about just sitting down quietly. Give yourself the time to go through half a dozen of these sort of methods. So how can I dial down that overwhelm when I don't know quite where to start? So what are the big problems? What's worrying me? Then how can I start to narrow it down into something a bit more practical that I can do something about? Once we start to take ownership of that, then actually we're in charge, and it's really empowering to know that, yeah, I've got it. I'm all right. I can get through this. Because small business owners are probably the most resilient bunch out there. So here's another quote I quite like, a bit grim, but you're not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. So this is a reminder that we don't need to do absolutely everything and burn ourselves out for other people's benefit. So look after yourself. I want to move into just looking at, I've got so much stuff on this. Honestly, I could go all day, but you've all got businesses to run, so we won't be doing that. What I want to do is just think about how we are, what motivates us now. So how can we start to have a more of a growth mindset? And that's something as a small business owner to definitely research more. So how can we be much more open to opportunity, to learning, to say fail fast? It's absolutely fine as long as you learn something. And then what can you do differently? Think about what motivates us, that kind of intrinsic motivation that within us, that we enjoy the process, not just the outcome. So you enjoy the creativity, the making, the design, and making something absolutely beautiful to sell, not just, I'm going to go and just make the money, because otherwise you could just import plastic widgets for that. But it doesn't align to your values and it's not creative. So it's the process that motivates you. We can then, once we're motivated, understand what it is we need to put into action. So think about SMART goals for your business. Targets, objectives, they're all very similar. But for something to be SMART, it is specific, it's measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. So what does this actually mean for a business owner? So let's look at something that's kind of long-term. So 6 months. We're now in January. Let's take this year as a nice calendar year, nice and tidy, ignoring financial years, but as an example. But this year you want to double your revenue. Okay, great. You can't think about that in November. You have to think about it now. And so by the summer, thinking about the seasonal changes maybe that affect your business, what is it you want to get to? Do you have a target you want to reach in 6 months? I always think this is like saying you want to run a marathon. Can't just run a marathon. You have to work backwards and say, okay, by 6 months, I need to be training X kilometers a day. In 3 months, I need to be doing this. But how do you get there? I like 3-month objectives because it's pretty much 12 weeks. It's tangible, it's measurable, and you can actually get a grip of it. 12 months is always like, yeah, it's later. Which is why when you come to November, you wonder why your sales aren't as good as they could be, because you just haven't had the sort of the rigor and the rhythm throughout the year to make sure you're measuring things monthly. And at the end, you suddenly think, oh, panic, quick, got to make those targets. So just to make life easier, keep it in measurable chunks. Bring it down into your short-term objectives. So, okay, if I want to make, this is tidy, so you want to increase sales by £120,000 in a year. Well, then that's £10,000 a month. It's pretty obvious. So what does that actually mean you have to do to get that? Does it mean you need to increase your product pricing? Does it mean you need to go out networking more and selling more of services or consultancy or whatever it is you offer? When you know what it is you have to achieve in those chunks, you can then measure the inputs. Is it cold calls? Is it lead generation online? Is it social media engagement? So how can you measure those inputs? Because then the outputs will come. And that's where, say, the revenue is. You've got your weekly activities. So maybe it's 2 networking events. It's a newsletter that has to go out twice a week. It's certain things that you know give you a return on investment. That then comes down into your daily tasks. Maybe that is picking up the phone. Making 5 cold calls a day will ultimately generate something that then contribute to your objectives. And if you're not meeting those objectives, then maybe you're not making enough calls. So you can just make those kind of tweaks quite quickly. And so being smart, so specific and measurable, measure and monitor your progress. Don't hide away. If you haven't made those targets or haven't achieved what you wanted to, why? Be honest with yourself. Is it because you set a number that was just too high? In which case, let's make it more sensible. Or maybe you were off sick. That's a human thing. Okay, so can I make up for it next week? Or actually, am I going to need to regroup and kind of do it more gently over the next few weeks? Something we are generally poor as small business owners is celebrating our wins. Make the most of something when it actually works out really well. And then also work out what you need to improve when you need to improve it too. You can then look at those really practical prioritizing tasks as well to make sure you're, I guess, working through, if you want to double that revenue, well, what does it mean from a sales perspective? And if I need to sell more, fine, but what does that mean? Is it upselling? Is it adding on an extra at the checkout? Is it changing your pricing by 10%? Or is it increasing your user engagement on social media? So this here is right, there we go. This is a week and it looks a bit full on. I want to just show you this very, very quickly to just get a view of how you can block out time and manage your time better. So when we decide in the week ahead, and of course, this is massively business dependent. So if you are a beautician, you're probably going to be booked out with clients most of the day, fingers crossed. So you might need to get a bit of time in the morning and the evening to do your admin around it. But pick the time that you have your most headspace. For most people, it's mornings, not everybody. What's strategic? So block out chunks of time. How can you work on your SMART goals? How can you work on those techniques that will help you double sales? You've then got business, which is what you actually do. So maybe that is working in the shop, maybe, it's that sort of face-to-face business part of your day. And then you've got stuff in admin. So what have you got around admin, emails, social media engagement, bookkeeping, the bits that you have to fill in? And block those out into chunks and make sure you fit them in and you don't let them all flow through and come into your kind of strategic headspace. And then also be really super sensible about when you're not around. So if you've got a networking event, a training course, a day off, block it out. So you can then work backwards and say, oh, I've only got half a day on Wednesday. I need to make the most of it. So just by getting a view of the week, you can then start to plot it out better to avoid some of the overwhelm and start to prioritize much more too. And you'll notice here in this particular shape, there's nothing strategic in the back end of the day. Forget it. Doesn't work for most people. So the one thing you can do in the morning, get it done, do one of those each day, and suddenly you've done 5 in a week and you've made quite a bit of progress. And then the last template to just sort of walk you through is around measuring and monitoring your weekly actions. So how do you know you've done what you set out to do? How can you measure success? This is, I always think, I sort of work Monday to Friday. I know obviously lots of people have sort of retail at the weekends, but imagine Friday afternoon, you can sit quietly and make your plan for the week ahead, better than doing it on a Monday morning. Think about what your important tasks are that you want to achieve. You've also at the bottom left got the weekly goals. So the goals are to make sure you've got 10 new client calls booked in, prospective client calls. Okay, how am I going to get there? At the end of the week, measure how you did. Like I say, be critical. If you didn't get 10, why not? Was it a wild number? Never going to happen? Or was it actually a case that you didn't pick up the phone because you were too fearful of making cold calls? Well, if that's the case, you're never going to get those 10 booked in. And if that's a consistent trend, maybe that's an opportunity to outsource some of your lead generation to somebody else who's an expert in doing that. So you can just be really critical about how you're succeeding and what needs to change. And then lastly, top right, it's quite nice to look at your weekly habits. You can colour these in. So at the end of the week, you get like a little map of all the successes that you've got to. It could be that you always go out for a walk at lunch. It could be that you always log off at 6, or maybe it's that you are starting to book in more, more networking and more calls and more ways to generate interest in your business. So just mapping those out, it's quite nice to then look back in the future, look back at the end of the year and say, well, actually, I think I did all right. So that also helps you look at that balance piece that maybe is spending time with the family, or you have some health and exercise goals. So you might want to put those into the habits too. So we all know you don't get fit or you don't lose weight if you don't eat well and you don't actually exercise. But we often look at the end in mind and just think, yeah, I want to be, 3 stone lighter. Okay, well, what do you need to do to get there? What's practical and what's sensible? It's the same with business. We want to run a successful business, but how do we get there in all of those little micro steps? So that's enough from me. I think it's time for questions. Come back to Amber, see what's in the Q&A. Like I said, I turned off the chat, but I might have a look now and see what's in there.
It's very, very busy. Lots of compliments flying around for you, Emma, and this wonderful talk today. I've definitely thoroughly enjoyed it. There's been so many tips and tricks in here. I do have a few questions. I think we've got about 7 minutes to run through, so I will quickly do that. First question is all about, will you get the slides? Will you get the recording? Yes, you will. You'll receive this in your inbox in the next couple of days, so you can always catch up. Lots of questions around the resources and those lovely templates that you showed us, Emma. Will we be able to send those out at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So if the recording comes out, but even as the PowerPoint, I can PDF it, and then you'll have a way of working through, and you can scribble on them as you need to.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That's super helpful. I think even I'm going to use it for me because there's lots of good tips there. Okay, right. So let's dive into the question. So the first one is, I am so in the business, I can't even get the mental clarity to look ahead and plan where I want to take the business in the future. Can you help? Where do I start?
That's a big issue. Little and often. So you won't necessarily be able to just go, right, half a day, take it out next week, but try and plan ahead and say, right, in 4 weeks' time, I want to take out half a day to work on the business. But what can I do short term? Can I block out an hour? And in doing so, it's not selfish. It's what you can do to work on your business. Mm-hmm. I always think early morning, that just works for me. I get so much more done early before life happens and business happens, because as soon as the calls start coming in or the emails, then I'm on, I've got sort of I put a different brain on. I think like words of gummidge heads, actually, which of a generation, some people will get that, others won't. But it's you've got sort of there's very different ways of thinking. So do it early, or it's great, go for a really good long walk. Clear your head, get out, but be intentional. So take a notebook, go out. There always has to be tea and cake involved, but you can just kind of get away from your desk or your shop or wherever you happen to work, and just think. It's not selfish, but it's hard to do. So you do need to block out dedicated time to be able to do it.
100%. And speaking of selfish and having that guilt around it, there's actually a question here. So I often feel guilty when thinking about my own business in marketing brackets, I am a marketeer and making time for my health and well-being, hobbies, etc. My business and money is doing well, but I still feel guilty that particularly on the weekends when I could be working on client stuff and I'm not doing it, even if they're not urgent tasks. So do you have any approaches to adopt to help overcome that guilt?
Color coding, right? I know it sounds odd. I'm a big advocate of color coding what's in your diary, because I'm very visual and I can see what needs to happen that way. Color coding what makes money. So what's client work. So you can look at it and say, actually, I've got like 8 hours that day. I mean, that's massive. That's more than a working day on a standard week. So then working out, okay, well, that's okay then to take time to work on my business, or blocking out times, I say, to just, you know, if you haven't got mad hours and the money is good, then that's absolutely fine. You do feel guilty. I feel guilty. I'm going out to a meeting and the client phones. I'm like, it's okay. I'm all right. I'm my own boss. So it does still factor in, but yeah, just by color coding what you know is billable, the rest of it, then you say, well, actually, no, I can play with that. That's my time. I can do it.
I love that. And I think it's very good to maybe see what you've done that week, because often people can forget how productive they have been and all the tasks that they have achieved and think, no, I need to do more. So that color coding approach is just so good to visually see what you've already done and help you take away that guilt. Cool. Okay, next question. So I've got quite a few questions around like productivity tools, and I know you had a bit of a caveat to say don't get sucked in and have the magpie syndrome with all the tools. But do you have any, one or two that you think are really beneficial for businesses when thinking about productivity and being a bit more time efficient?
You're not going to like the answer. No.
That's okay. That's okay. I like it.
Right. No, I mean, our brain, I know it sounds a bit trite, but it's how we work is the most important thing. You need to pick why you need something. And so that's why there's no easy answer. I have to say, I'm a big fan of OneNote. I use that for loads. So I can keep things, if I think, right, if I've done something 2 or 3 times, or if I had to look for it 3 times, then it needs to live somewhere sensible rather than trying to keep rummaging around all the time. So I'll put things in OneNote so I can literally cut and paste. And that for me saves a lot of time. You might use some of the project management tools, monday.com, you might use, Trello, Jira, whatever needs to work for you. But there's no easy answer until you understand what the end point is, why you need to do something. Then you can work out, go backwards and say, well, what tools are going to get me there? It's like putting up a bookcase, putting up a set of shelves. There's no point. Wrong tools out the toolbox.
Yeah. And there's so many out there. I can understand the overwhelm and why businesses are like, where do I even start with all of this? Right, we are coming to the end. There was something I wanted to mention, because you mentioned about boundaries, and I thought this was quite a good comment. Someone said, I set an automatic reply on my emails to let my clients know how quickly I will respond, and it works very well for me. So I thought that was quite a good tip when thinking about your boundaries and how quickly you can work within the business. We are just coming to the end. I can see that you've just popped on the free learning available for Lloyds Bank Academy. So yeah, please do feel free to continue your learning journey. Lloyds have lots of great free help and advice. There's some here around productivity, so leading and collaborating using online tools and how to save time and money with the cloud, the mystical cloud that everyone's trying to always figure out. And then I think if we go to the next one, we've just got a little QR to share your feedback, let us know how you found it today. And we always love to hear from you. And it just helps us improve the sessions as we continue, and let us know what you want to hear more of as well. Just before we wrap up today, Emma, I want to say thank you so much for your time. I also loved all the little quotes you had littered through the session. I'm feeling super inspired. Do you have one final tip just to leave all the businesses with today before we head off?
Stop and draw breath. It's okay. Nothing's going to disappear. Just take time, take 5 minutes to just stop and think. You're resilient. You do brilliantly. We are small business owners are a fantastic bunch. So celebrate that, and just take 5 minutes to think about what you want to achieve and not get into the detail.
Make a cup of tea, sit, breathe,
Always.
Deep thoughts. I love it. Emma, thank you so much. I absolutely always love hosting these sessions with you. You're so amazing. Lloyds, thank you as well for partnering with us. We love you guys. Thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you very soon. We've got lots more content coming up, so do keep an eye on that. If you ever need us, please email us at hello@smallbusinessbritain.uk, and someone on the team will get back to you. Just remember, you're not alone. We're here to help. But all the best. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.